How's it going, everybody? Bryan, Alvarez, and Dave Meltzer here, Wrestling Observer Radio. It is December 20, 2018, figure4online.com/wrestlingobserver.com. Lots of news to talk about here today, including we have new members in the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame. L.A. Park, Jerry Jarrett, Jimmy Hart, Bill Apter, Howard Finkel, Gary Hart, Yuji Nagata, all going into the 2018 Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame. Yuji Nagata just made it 60% of the vote. Gary Hart, 61%. And L.A. Park, 74% of the vote this year. So that's it. Los Misioneres barely missed it, 57%. And after that, Jun Akiyama down to 55%, and it goes down from there. And we can talk a little bit later about people dropping off the ballot. And I guess we'll just start with who went in. Dave, any thoughts?
Well, I figured L.A. Park was going to go in this year. The three people who I was expecting were L.A. Park, Jerry Jarrett, and Ultimo Guerrero. And Ultimo Guerrero actually didn't make it. The other ones, I mean, they all did well last year. Nagata, I guess, was a mild surprise. I just had sensed a lot of interest in Jerry Jarrett this year. Jimmy Hart, not really a surprise. I mean, no one's going to get 60% of the vote if they don't deserve to be in. I mean, it is what it is. I can't argue with any of them. It's just they're the ones who got in. I don't think anyone. I think L.A. Park was a slam dunk after this year. I personally thought he should have been in already, but this year, what he accomplished this year, it completely solidified his case. Jerry Jarrett, I think that's. I mean, I think he should have gone in. Jimmy Hart's an interesting one because Jimmy Hart's run in Memphis was one of the best runs I've ever seen of a manager, ever. But I don't think his work after Memphis was Hall of Fame level. But so it's kind of like he had several years that were, but the totality of his career, I really can't say that. Bill Apter is just, whatever you think of Bill Apter and the wrestling magazines and his influence and things like that. It's not really anything that I would really, it's just a matter, I don't know. I mean, I don't really have an opinion one way or the other on Bill Apter. I mean, he's a friend of mine, but as far as Hall of Fame, that's a unique case. Howard Finkel, I think, belongs. I think the sad part of Howard Finkel that differentiates him from the Jimmy Lennon, who's the only other ring announcer in, and the boxing ring announcers who are in the Boxing Hall of Fame, which I think would be, there's a few. I know that Michael Buffer and Jimmy Lennon Jr. and Jimmy Lennon Sr. are in, is that none of them were replaced, and Howard Finkel was replaced way too early. It's kind of like one of those things where, I mean, I think that he was such a classic ring announcer that he probably belongs. But, I mean, could you imagine boxing replacing Michael Buffer when he turned 50 or Jimmy Lennon Jr.? I mean, it just wouldn't happen. And it did with Howard Finkel. I mean, it's like, in theory, if you're a classic Hall of Famer, they shouldn't replace you. And that's, especially just because they feel it's time, unless it's like you can't do it anymore. He could have done it for another 15 years, no problem. But they did. I think Gary Hart's a Hall of Famer. I wrote a ton about Gary Hart this week because I find him a very intriguing character. And, he, between the booking and the managing, he was one of the best managers I've seen as far as like promo wise goes. And he was a very good booker at times. At the end, it was tough, but it was for everybody. And Yuji Nagata is an interesting one. I don't consider him a slam dunk. I mean, and I think the way he got in it actually was very interesting because most people who get in, it's the reporters who make up the majority of the voters. Yuji Nagata got in by the wrestlers. The reporters he did not do well with. With the wrestlers, with the active wrestlers, he did phenomenal. Basically, everyone voted for him. So his respect among the wrestlers is what pulled him
that's
through.
not that surprising.
He's very well respected among the wrestlers. He's the thing, Yuji Nagata is a great, great wrestler. You can't take that away from him, and was for, over 20 years, and still really is today if they wanted to put him in the position. But it's one of those things where I think that everyone kind of acknowledges that, years ago, that they, when you build for the future, sometimes guys who are in their late 40s, even if they can still go, it's really not the right thing to feature them. He got his big, that big farewell last year at G1, 2017 G1, which was phenomenal. I wish he had won more. I actually wish that he would have been alive at the end. They didn't book it that way, but that's how they book. Even even as late as last year's G1, the guy was just great. And I think that if need be, it's just New Japan just got so much depth that a guy like Yuji Nagata is just, he's right now his role is to work prelims against all the young guys and help teach the young guys. And look at how quick these young guys come along. So I think he's really good in that role. He's one of those guys where I think, a lot of what he does is kind of like unsung, I think, for his career. They gambled on him with the Crow Cup fight, and that it didn't nearly end his career, but it really hurt him for a while as far as to the public, as far as perception and things like that. It's funny because the Crow Cup fight now, when you look back on it, sounds like such an absolutely stupid idea. And I guess it was, but at the time it didn't seem so stupid because they were looking at, New Japan was kind of hurting for business because Pride had gotten so popular. And the mentality always was that, well, in a fight, the wrestler's going to beat the kickboxer because he's going to take him down. And then the kickboxer can't do anything. And Yuji Nagata was a very good wrestler. He won 2 national championships in college in Japan, an Olympic hopeful. But, and Crow Cup was a kickboxer. But, Crow Cup by that time was a beast. He was, and he was still in competition, and he was very enhanced. And Yuji Nagata went to try to take him down and got shoved off like it was nothing. And then it was like, that's bad news. And Nagata lost in like whatever it was, 21 seconds, whatever it was, as the New Japan, the guy who New Japan was grooming to be its new top star. So it backfired on him. And I don't think he ever fully recovered from that. I think in time, fans kind of accepted what pro wrestling was. And certainly like in the last 10 years, I think that like the idea that he got beat in a shoot fight, the idea that would ruin his wrestling career, it's a very different mentality. The New Japan fan base now, they're not looking for like in the 70s where it was about, you wanted to believe that these are real tough guys. Even in the 90s with Hashimoto and everything, I think that was a big part of the New Japan presentation with Hashimoto and Ogawa and Don Fry and Scott Norton and people like that. It was still about not so much pretty work, but tough guys. But now it's about, it's about match quality, and it's about, it's not about, who's the toughest or anything like that. It's about who can perform the best under the guise of pro wrestling. So, what Nagata did in his shoot fights with Fedor and Crow Cup didn't really matter. But by that point, it was time had marched on, and, it was Tanahashi's era. And Nagata was never the guy. When he was on top, and he was on top for a while in the early 2000s, it was when that company was going down. Because he wasn't that big megastar. He was a great professional wrestler, but he was a great professional wrestler for years and years and years. And sometimes, I think a lot of people respect that as well. So that's the situation with him.
I want to go over a couple of these here because there were some big ups and big downs. These are people that were up and down more than 10%. Akira Taue up a ton this year, 34 to 52% this year. Kenny Omega debuted at 49%. So it's not really like up, but started from nothing. Junkyard Dog of all the years, like all of a sudden this year, he's up from 31 to 48%. Not sure what happened there. Mr. Wrestling 2, up from 31 to 46.
I think with JYD, I think that as more people talk, there becomes more of a groupthink, and the groupthink was beneficial to Junkyard Dog. It's funny because I also think the one thing that I've noticed, I mean, there's definitely a change in the balloting because a lot of older voters did not vote this year. They got sick. Things happen. They get older, but it was a lot. It was a big difference with a lot. So I think what happens is that a lot of people who saw people as they were, especially in the previous era, aren't voting, and you're having people who are looking at it with it's a different kind of look. And I think that really benefited Akira Taue because Akira Taue, in his time, I mean, nobody talked about Akira Taue as being a Hall of Famer or anything like that. Now, if you look back at all those tag team matches, I mean, my God, they're the best tag team matches in the history of wrestling. But the guys who worked with him, I mean, he was not, he was basically a tall guy who, I'm not saying he wasn't good. And maybe there's some sympathy also because he's suffering from cancer right now. I really don't think that played a part, but it could have. But, people who, if you just watch, I'm going to watch Akira Taue's 10 best matches, you're going to go and go oh, this guy's a Hall of Famer, as opposed to people who may have worked with him on tour constantly, or people who, watched All Japan in that era all the time and saw, the week by week, as opposed to maybe the big Budokan main event where he's in there with, it's Kawada and Taue against Misawa and Kobashi. So he's in there with legitimately three of the greatest wrestlers that ever lived. And I mean, he was a star, and he did sell out Budokan a few times as a single on top, and he had some great singles matches. It's just but still, I mean, I can see that people look at him very differently now than in his time. I mean, I don't think anyone saw him. I shouldn't say anyone, but I mean, a Hall of Fame. I mean, maybe a guy on a ballot, maybe. I mean, it took a while for anyone to really suggest him even be on the ballot to begin with. And, so yeah, and JYD, it's, again, it's not people who lived through him during his career. I mean, he was a big drawing card in Mid-South Wrestling for several years, and then his career, drugs kind of ruined his career, and he went to WWE. He had a couple of good years there, but then he they had to get rid of him because he was, his drug issues were so bad, and there was always attempts to push him because in those days, if you had a run, they always, it's kind of carried over even when it was over. It's remember when he went to the Superdome and blah, 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 blah. So he's going to go and draw all those people again. But, he never did come back. I mean, like that 1990 thing with Flair, which was such a horrible idea. But it was JYD, he used to draw big money and he'll draw the blacks and, that type of thing. That was the mentality they had, even though JYD had stopped drawing years earlier and he was out of shape and God knows those Ric Flair JYD matches were horrible. And very rarely did Ric Flair have horrible matches. But, I mean, he did draw, you can't take that away from him. He was a big star in Mid-South Wrestling. And I think that maybe in time also the, people remember the good and forget the bad. That could be something there too. But yeah, I mean, he was way up.
Don Owen was down a lot, 50 to 37. Red Bastien was up 25 to 35. Randy Orton, big jump.
It's still not enough to so.
No one here is close. But Randy Orton.
I'm saying no. But Bastien needed to be hit 50 to stay on the ballot because it was his 15th year, and I think Don Owen. I think Don Owen's got to get 50% next year. I think he's off as well.
Yeah, we'll go through those in a second. Randy Orton up 23 to 35, which is a pretty substantial jump this year. And Stanley Weston way down, 45 to 32.
Which is interesting because Bill Apter went way up.
Yep.
So,
Mark Rocco, 38 to 27.
Yeah.
And also, what else do we have here as far as big drops? Jackie Paulo, 25 this year, 10% last year, so he's way up. And Shima down a lot, 33 to 24.
That's interesting, too, because honestly, I think this year, by Shima leaving Dragon Gate and Dragon Gate having such a bad year in comparison to the year before, it almost, to me, showed his value at a much higher level than maybe people thought. I actually thought Shima was a much stronger candidate this year than last year.
Naito's barely up, 16 to 21%.
Yeah, I wonder, how many years do you have to have? Because, obviously, Naito, if you go on, the last few years, Naito's clear Hall of Fame years. So I don't think there's any doubt the last few, but I don't know if it's been enough. Obviously, it's not. He's still not even at the top level. But if he has several more years, which I'm sure he's going to have. I look at like Naito and Kenny Omega as guys who I would be shocked if they're not in the Hall of Fame. It's just a question of like, is it next year? Is it a couple? Is it a couple of years? Omega started at a high level anyway, but when you're talking about a guy who had like a year like he had this year, drew big, IWGP champion, incredible match quality, some of the best matches I've ever seen. How hard it is for a foreigner to get to the level that he has in New Japan, not just because he's a foreigner, but because of the freaking quality. The quality to be like the top guy in New Japan now is just, the standard is just insane, because you got to compete with, Naito, and you got to compete with Okada, and you got to compete with Tanahashi and Ishii and Kota Ibushi, and on and on and on and on and on down the line. Those top guys, it's just incredible depth. And, it's very hard for someone, of course he's made a big difference in their international business. Yeah. I don't know. I didn't expect him to go in first year because it's very difficult, and he's 35 years old and people sometimes will hold off, but man, I don't know. Now if Okada doesn't go in first ballot though, that would be a travesty. Okada's really the only guy I would say out of the guys who aren't in that are active. There's nobody else. When I look at like who is there out there right now that's not on the ballot yet, who's, let's say, 32, 33 years old, whatever. Okada's 31 right now. But where you just go like surefire first ballot Hall of Famer. He's how could he not be, right? Am I missing something?
No, I think that he has to go in. I will say one thing about Kenny Omega, I don't know if I think that Kenny Omega is a Hall of Famer right now, but when they do that 10-hour Kenny Omega marathon on Access TV, I think if you sit down and watch all 10 hours of that marathon, you might come out of it thinking the guy is a Hall of Famer.
Well, again, it's just, I don't think there's any question that the last 3 years have been Hall of Fame years for Kenny Omega. I don't think that you can even question that. The question is 3 years enough? And I don't know that it is. With him, one of the things with him is that he was having these great matches long before, but they were in smaller places, so they didn't get the exposure. He was in DDT for all those years, but DDT didn't really get a lot of coverage, and it's a comedy promotion and things like that. But you look back at some of the matches he had there, or even matches. I remember seeing him in All Japan, and some of those matches with Prince Devitt, Finn Balor, and Taguchi, and when Omega and Ibushi were doing tag teams for the junior tag team title in New Japan. If you go back and watch those matches, but they weren't main events. But if you watch those matches were incredible. Not at the dramatic, incredible level of the matches now. They were more athletic in a lot of ways, but they were not as, they were not as classic, or as the kind of, thought process, so to speak, that goes into the matches now. But they were still state of the art matches for their time, and they're still great. So, I don't know. It's just, again, I don't know. I don't know that 3 years is enough, but if you're 3 years in and you're right up there with Wrestler of the Year all 3 years and Match of the Year and all that stuff, and obviously he's over. And I mean, look at the Tokyo Dome numbers, and the Dome's ahead of last year. The tickets, they had good tickets at the Dome. I mean, shoot, this year, to get good seats at the Dome, you had to win a lottery to get those seats. It's ridiculous. You can get in. It's still not WrestleMania as far as like that level of ticket interest. It's not that, but it's also a much, much, much smaller company. When you talk about the resources of the individual companies, what they do, what they do with the Dome as compared to what the WWE's does for WrestleMania, you can argue it's even more impressive. I don't know. It is more impressive, but the fact is that they're driven by the card, and last year him and Jericho was huge. As far as like the subscription service, he was a real mover. This year, and not to mention, he set the Ring of Honor record for attendance. He set that Northeast Wrestling Gate record. The G1 with Ibushi was the biggest semifinal in the history of G1 for attendance and gate. New Japan had its best year economically in forever this year with him at the top. So for half the year, Okada was the top for the other half of the year. But his half of the year did great. So he's pretty close. I don't know. I don't know. I actually think that if you consider all Impact and everything like that, New Japan's expansion, and compare him to other people when you're throwing in influence, I think he's already there. But again, first ballot's very, very difficult. Tanahashi didn't make first ballot. I think Cena made first ballot. A lot of people. I don't think Austin even made first ballot. I think Austin might have been second ballot. Rock was first ballot, easy. And with the super, Rock was first ballot, Liger was first ballot. Who else was first ballot? Sakuraba was first ballot. Who else? I'm trying to think. Kenta Kobashi for sure. So, but those guys, they did have more, Liger especially. Like Liger had way, way, way more years as a spotlight guy. Even though he was never the star that Omega is now, he was the, you could say the greatest junior heavyweight wrestler of all time. And that in and of itself, if you say someone's the greatest junior heavyweight wrestler of all time, they're in. That type of a statement should put you in. So, yeah.
All right, these individuals got less than 10% of the vote. They are off the ballot. Samoa Joe, Paul Jones, Horst Hoffman, Ed Francis, Johnny Barend, Ruben Juarez, Universo dos Mil, Vampiro, and Steve Ricard.
Yeah, if they were going to get in, you're going to get more than 10%. So Joe might, again, in 2 years, Joe may put Joe back on the ballot, depending on, if he has 2 more good years. But obviously people didn't see him as a Hall of Fame guy.
Drop from the ballot due to the 15-year 50% rule. Kiyoshi Tamura, Blue Panther, Red Bastien, Mr. Wrestling 2, John Tolos, Cian Caras. Filthy Tom's going to be furious to hear about Tamura, but...
Me too.
That's what happens.
I mean, to me, Tamura, it's sad for me for Tamura because I consider him a Hall of Fame worker. But, he was incredible. But the problem is that, when your style dies, the legacy dies with it. People who saw Tamura in his day, I mean, if you saw the early ballots, Tamara came very close to getting in. But as time went on, because rings died and shoot style died, people don't think of Tamara in that way. And it's just a kind of a reality of how they were thought of when they were around as compared to the memories of them. That's why I think that, like, wrestling's very unique compared to other forms of sport or entertainment, because, like, sports are kind of like, I don't want to say they're the same. It's like I mean, yeah, like there's strategies that change in the NFL and certainly in basketball. There's different aspects of the game, but essentially the game is the same game. Baseball's the same game it's been forever. Pro wrestling is a very different game because there's so many different styles and there's so many different ways you look at it, and memories or looking back, you can't transport yourself into the time and place, and wrestling is all about time and place. So, I mean, the thing with Tamara is he wasn't in what is now a major promotion because his company's died. I mean, if you actually went back and watched tapes of his matches, actually, I think you'd probably be super impressed, but I don't think people do because it's not a New Japan, or an All Japan that people will look back on. It was rings. And you can see it. I know people go on the internet and have seen, like, his matches, and it's like, oh my God, this guy's fantastic. But again, you have to be told about it because the legacy's not there because the company's died. So, I don't know that, again, is he a Hall of Famer? He was not a Hall of Famer as a drawing card, but he did fine. But when, rings was all about Akira Maeda. And he was the guy who was to succeed Akira Maeda. And the reality is that nobody was going to be able to succeed Akira Maeda. It was just how it was. The game was changing. When you're doing shoot style, and then there's real shooting. Shoot style was inherently obsolete at that point. And so he was the star of a style that had become obsolete, and he was not, even though Akira Maeda could still draw to a degree after that because he was Akira Maeda and he was just a genuine superstar. I mean, Tamara was not the superstar like Maeda or Takada. He was never that big. He would have probably been had the world not changed. But as a worker, he was better than either of them. I mean, I used to consider him equivalent to Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero. And those were the best guys, in the business at the time.
All right, so next year, if they do not get 50% or more, Don Owen, Jun Akiyama, Viano 3, all will be dropped from the ballot.
I actually think that looking at this year's ballot, when you look at who has been taken off the top, with 7 people taken off the top and out, that Jun Akiyama and Viano 3 have a really good shot at going in. Because there's going to be guys. It's next year's ballot is going to be in some ways. I mean, because of who you're taking off the top. Next year's ballot is going to be, I don't say the weakest, but yeah, I think kind of like in some ways the weakest ballot that there's ever been. And Akiyama almost got in this year. Viano almost got in this year. So if you have a weaker ballot, I think that those are going to be 2 of the favorites. Don Owen will be tough. It just depends on if a lot of people study him and go, you know what, you need to stay on the ballot. I mean, you can't argue. The things Don Owen has going for him is his longevity as a promoter is ridiculous. 60 years or something, whatever it is. I mean, the Owen family promoted for 60 years. But Don himself probably promoted for over 50 as the lead promoter. And that's something. He had a rep for being fair, at least to the last couple of years when the territory was doing terrible. Then I don't think that, nobody was making a lot of money then. But when business was solid, he was a good payoff guy. He was very well respected in that way. He was a really respected guy, I think, overall. Like everyone, he's going to have his detractors, and he was far from a perfect guy. I mean, I know some stories about him, that don't reflect very well on him as a person. But it's, again, when you can't always view, how 2018 standards for things that somebody may have said in 1972. It's like, that's kind of being, ridiculous to hold somebody to 2018 standards in 1972 when they were in a cutthroat and very uniquely business where a lot of the morals and standards were maybe even behind the times for the 70s, let alone behind the times for today. But, so, I mean, those are the pluses. Then the minuses is Oregon was never a giant territory. It was just a territory. Jim Crockett Sr. had a much, much, much bigger territory. If you're looking at it that way, Jim Crockett Sr., probably belongs in, if you look at like just overall success as a promoter, Jim Crockett Jr. even. And, I think that what hurt Jim Crockett Jr. was those last years and going out of business and everything like that. And I mean, and that's part of your legacy. But if you take Jim Crockett Jr. from 1975 through 1986, this guy, his base cities were Charlotte and Greensboro, and he had one of the best promotions during that whole period in the world. I mean, they were drawing real big, they were drawing really, really big in again, not giant cities. He didn't have the New York market. He didn't have the Los Angeles market. I mean, he came to Chicago late, but you look at the Carolinas in the 70s. I mean, that place was rocking. It had, the best talent in the world. The guys were paid really well. And he did that again. Like, he didn't have a Chicago. He did that in minor cities. I mean, and he had, a lot of it's, he had Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat, but still, he recognized and got them over. I mean, but again, when you look at Jim Crockett, you still remember, like, at the very end, I mean, the thing really went down hard and had to sell. But, is 11 years, 12 years as a successful promoter enough? I don't know. I mean, Don Owens had a lot more than that. None of the promoters who were in had 12 years and then busted. But when I look at like Jim Crockett Jr. and the quality of the shows he promoted and what he drew in so many different cities and the talent that he had, and I compare him to Roy Shire, who was in, Roy Shire had more longevity, and Roy Shire was a better booker because Jim Crockett wasn't a booker. But Jim Crockett had a better territory, I mean, and better shows. I watched Jim Crockett shows. I watched Roy Shire shows. Jim Crockett shows were much better. So that's another way of looking at it. But, there's stuff you can talk forever about, all these guys. But, as far as Don Owens goes, it's just a question. He's not the biggest promoter. No promoter at his success level is in other than Stu Hart. And Stu Hart started a hell of a lot of people in the business. And Stu Hart was a real, he has a unique legacy in the business. I mean, Don did to a degree, but not to the level that Stu Hart had. And, and Stu lasted decades as well. Although Stu had more ups and downs and tough times than Don, who ran a steady business. But Stu's ups were probably higher than Don's ups as well.
And then next year, added to the ballot, Jose Lothario, Dick Slater, Morris Siegel, Bob Cottle, the Hardys, Valiant Brothers, George Kidd, Tomohiro Ishii, James Melby, Stephanie McMahon, Volador Jr., and the Grand Wizard.
Some interesting guys. George Kidd to me is a lock, but I don't know that he'll get the votes. But he's a Hall of Famer for sure. Because a lot of people who vote for Johnny Saint, Johnny Saint was just a copy of George Kidd, and George Kidd did it first, and George Kidd's the biggest star ever in Scotland, so I think he should be in.
Somebody had mentioned that you had stated that Stephanie has a case. They wanted to know what the case is.
She's been a big-time star and TV personality for 20 years now. So she's the face of the company. I think that there's a case there.
I don't know about that one, but I guess we'll see next year. All right, let's talk about Smackdown, the ratings, Raw and Smackdown ratings, and then the show itself. What'd you think?
The ratings were up, as we expected. The third hour, the gauntlet, did not fall at a bad level. It fell at an average level. So I would say it was, I wouldn't call it a success, but it was not a failure.
It was not a failure.
Yeah, it did worse as far as keeping the audience with men than usual, but it did better with women, which is funny because the more that women are on television, on wrestling, the lower the percentage of women viewers are, which is a very unique stat, that I've been following.
Have you followed the stat in the sense of like that Bayley, Sasha, Alexa Bliss deal that they did to open up Raw a few months ago, about a month ago or whatever? I mean, to me that was like god awful, and if I were like a woman, I would have just been appalled by that. But like women having wrestling matches, I mean, if I were a woman, I'd be far less appalled about that because they're out there actually like wrestling and being put in like a main event position. I mean, I asked about this on Observer Live because we had a lot of feedback after that Alexa Bliss, Becky Lynch, because I thought it was like horrible. And I asked everybody, like, did you watch the show with like your wife or your girlfriend? And what did they think about it? And like, there weren't a lot of people that watched it with their wives or girlfriends, but those that did, just their wives and girlfriends hated the segment. So, I mean, to me, it was like the women came off so unlikable, but they don't come off that way when they actually have wrestling matches. So maybe you should track like talking segments and debate segments versus actual wrestling.
Unfortunately, it's hard to do that. But, the actual wrestling, the women drop off in the third hour was a little less than usual on Monday. I mean, that's that much you can track. But there's a lot of times when you have women in matches in the third hour where generally speaking, the women aren't going to last as long as the men. It's like, and the teenage boys in particular are more likely to spend the 3 hours watching than pretty much any other demo. But that wasn't the case on Monday. I think that one of the reasons why the women audience has dropped faster than the men is the decline. Because I think a lot of the women audience came in for based on learning about wrestling by watching Total Divas. I really think that boosted it created a new audience for WWE. And in fact, I think that some of that, because they created that new audience, hid the amount of traditional wrestling fan decline that was going on, especially with guys, during a couple of years there, where, it looked bad, but it was really worse than it looked in a lot of ways. But now that Total Divas is its ratings are terrible. Let me take that back, because they're declining. They've declined greatly. They're not terrible, because if they were terrible, they'd be canceled, and they're good enough not to be canceled. But their audience has dropped greatly in the last year. And
well, not only that, but like a lot of the Bellas are big. They're like big stars, and they're not on Raw. So if you were a fan of like Total Bellas, Total Divas, and you were big, because there are a lot of women that are Nikki Bella fans, and if you tuned into Raw because you wanted to see the Bellas wrestling, they're gone.
Yeah. But Ronda Rousey's a much bigger star than Nikki Bella ever was, and she's been a lot more successful drawing male viewers than female viewers. And that wasn't the case in UFC. I think that people who wanted to see Ronda Rousey for her athletic success and get behind her, I think that a lot of those people feel that she probably lowered herself going into wrestling and didn't follow her there. I think that's pretty clear, actually.
All right, so the SmackDown show itself, Vince is back. The show did 89% of Raw yet again.
Yeah. I mean, the rating was up. Mustafa Ali pinning Daniel Bryan at the end was a nice surprise. We'll see where that goes. I mean, they better do Mustafa Ali and Daniel Bryan in a program now, or else that was a release. You know what I mean? Or else it's like, why would you do that? Why would you beat your world champion unless you're setting up a title match? If they are, that's great. It jumpstarts a guy. He comes in as, somebody rather than, just another guy. I mean, they actually did something with him. That's great. That's great that they did. So, the show seemed to lack, the Fresno audience seemed to lack heat. There was one thing on this show, and it was like, I was so embarrassed by this. And this is Daniel Bryan's doing his thing. And he goes, Fresno, by the way, this as a statistic, it's actually not true, but he said that Fresno is has the highest level of pollution of any city in the state of California. And everybody, I won't say everybody, but there were people cheering and chanting, yes, yes, yes. And I'm going like, did you people listen to what he said? They thought like he was saying something nice about the city, and they were cheering him when he was telling them that they have a high level of air pollution. That was like, when I saw that, it was like, man, if I was a school teacher in Fresno, I would say, boy, did we fail.
I could try to explain this, but I'd be thinking too hard.
Well, they thought that the name dropping the city and high level of pollution was a compliment.
Well, I was thinking that maybe like they don't like the guy. He's supposed to be a heel. So when he says their city has a high level of pollution, which they know bothers him, they cheer. I don't know. Or they just weren't paying attention.
Well, so if you say that like the local sports team is terrible, you're actually trying to get cheered?
Well, no, I'm just saying like if a guy comes to my town and I hate him, and I know that he doesn't like hamburgers, and he says, you have so many damn hamburgers in this town, I'd go, yeah, we do. Too bad for you, buddy.
I don't think that's ever happened in wrestling that I've ever seen.
Yeah, I overthought it.
Yeah, I think that the real thing is just the people were stupid and think that pollution is like something that you cheer, like it's a good thing.
Now you're getting cheap heat from the people in Fresno.
No, it's like how else?
You just called them all stupid.
I didn't call them all stupid by any means. I called the ones who cheered air pollution stupid.
Well, apparently that was most of them.
No, I would be willing to say that if you asked most people in Fresno, San Jose, or Bakersfield, which has a lot of pollution, or Los Angeles, which is the worst, usually, although due to the fires, hasn't been the worst lately. San Francisco's been terrible lately, but San Francisco is another one. If you ask people, like, is air pollution good or bad? I think the vast majority would tell you.
Well, sure. I'm just talking about the fans in the building.
Yeah. Well, that maybe tells you about the audience that they attracted, which is a scary thought.
So that was the main event of the show,
but that was technically the match was good. But they didn't get a lot of heat in that match. No, whatever. Some cities don't. That's whatever.
Dave, I hate to say it, but like, let's think about who they had in there. Like Daniel Bryan's over. Mustafa Ali is brand new. Nobody cares one bit about Andrade Cien Almas because they don't do a damn thing with the guy.
Well, that's true. He was really cold. And AJ Styles has been the biggest star in the brand for a long, long time, and he's great.
Yeah, but he was on the apron the entire time. He literally stood on the apron for 85% of this match.
Yeah, because it was Mustafa Ali's match.
Yeah.
And they did beat Mustafa Ali week 1.
They beat him, and you know what? I don't want to complain, but I'm gonna, because I was just thinking about this today. So Vince wants to shake everything up. So he brings in a bunch of people, and now he's giving a push to Mustafa Ali. Now, I have nothing against Mustafa Ali. In fact, I think Mustafa Ali is pretty damn great, okay?
He's really great. Yeah.
But can't we do something with the guys that are on the brand?
Well, you know what?
Cien Almas?
Okay, here's the thing. Mustafa Ali is not damaged goods.
He's not, but
Andrade Cien Almas, based on what you just said, the very lack of reaction to him, they have damaged him. I'm not saying it's irrevocable damage, but it's absolutely damage. I'll tell you what. I mean, one of the things that I did a lot of writing in this week's issue about a lot of different things, and one of it is similar to Lacey Evans stuff that I said the other night. I mean, if you remember the Andrade Cien Almas and Zelina Vega pairing on NXT, they were an awesome pairing. She was a superstar. He was a superstar, because his ring work was so good. But she was like she was like the personality of the duo. They put him on the main brand. They have her wrestle, which she's not good at. They don't really give them any kind of a push. And here they are, and they legitimately, they are so talented, and they mean nothing. And to me, that's like. That's one of the
That's the big issue here. Like, great, you bring up a whole bunch of people. They're all fresh, so they're not damaged goods.
And then you damage them.
In 3 months, they're now damaged goods. So now it's like, okay, well, we got to bring up some more people. And they don't send anybody down. Like, Tyler Breeze down there for a week. But, I mean, the more people you bring up, the more people you have on the roster that aren't doing a damn thing. Like, but they actually said in Storyline, Dave, they actually said the Usos, the New Day, and Sheamus and Cesaro just keep wrestling each other. That's and then they tell us Sanity hasn't been here, and Gallows and Anderson haven't been on the show since August. And it's like, well, maybe you should have done something with them, and the three teams wouldn't have just wrestled each other 50 times. Like, what the hell were they doing? Where were they?
By the way, so what happened with you and Jimmy Jacobs?
What do you mean?
Oh, I mean, like, what did he say?
I mean, we just, okay, so everyone can listen to the show if you want to hear it's an hour long, but basically, like when the Raw ratings came out, I said, this is embarrassing. And he had been, I guess him and the Impact crew had spent 24 hours or whatever, and it was just tough writing that 2-hour show. And so he just tweeted, writing a 3-hour show every week is hard.
It is hard.
Yeah. So we had him on the show today to basically explain the whole situation with writing for WWE. And we only had an hour. We need about 10 hours. But
I think I could explain it in 1 week. We're writing for Vince McMahon, and Vince McMahon's tastes no longer reflect his viewers, and so we're fucked.
Well, yes, but
so did I explain that in one sentence?
Well, yes, but basically, I didn't bring this up because I didn't even think about it till later. But like one of the things that he mentioned was, there's a finite number. He says there's a finite number of matches that you can do. And the people complain that they see the same matches over and over again. And it's difficult to try to come up with new combinations.
Okay.
But hold on, here's the thing. On Tuesday on Smackdown, I mean, they tell you that these guys have just been off the show for 4 months.
Okay, but here's the thing. The reason that there's a finite number is because everyone is slotted, and they rarely, there's always exceptions, but they rarely move up from their slot or down for their slot. So the middle guys that they're slotted with are going to work with each other. The top guys are going to work with each other. And you end up, and you don't bring a lot of guys in, and guys never leave. So you end up with kind of like, okay, AJ Styles has 2 or 3 people he can work with. So he works with those 2 or 3 people all year long.
Yeah, but that's absolutely ridiculous.
But
AJ Styles should be able to work with like 50 people.
Oh, no, that's the whole problem. That's the problem with slotting guys and not letting guys move up and down. The key is guys should move up and down rather than stay stagnant. And everyone stays stagnant. It's like the reason you got those 3 teams is because every other team is considered below their level, and they won't elevate them to that level because they're slotted below that level. So, you don't use Gallows and Anderson in a tag team title situation because they're not that good. I'm not saying that they're not that good because they actually are very good, but that's the perception and push of them is that they're a level below. So if we put them in there, people aren't going to buy it because that's where they're slotted. So we got the Usos, who people will buy as champions because they've been in the championship level. The New Day, because they're very, very popular and they've been pushed for years. So and Sheamus and Cesaro because they had the Raw belts a couple of times, and they're a very good team, and Sheamus been pushed like a star for 100 years now, and Cesaro's very, very talented, although obviously people forgot how much they used to like him because they've finally been beaten down by the fact that he's never going to be what they want him to be.
Well, here are the spoilers, everybody. If you don't want to hear spoilers, skip ahead like 5 minutes here. Next week's Smackdown on Tuesday night was taped on this past Tuesday. Carl Anderson, Luke Gallows, and the Usos beat the Sanity in the Bar. And we had New Day on commentary wearing Santa outfits. And Anderson and Gallows got the win. So they came back after 4 months, and they got a win. We had R-Truth and Carmella out. Truth dressed as Santa Claus. Bryan interrupts.
So we have the New Day as Santa Claus and R-Truth as Santa Claus?
Yeah, a lot of Santa Claus on the show.
Is it like they have different agents in different segments and they don't talk?
Apparently. So this led to a dance break. Bryan jumped Truth. So I guess that also means Bryan was not killed when Mustafa Ali smashed him with his double knees on that inverted 450. We had Mustafa Ali beating Andrade Cien Almas.
I heard that was a good match, and I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, I heard that was good.
So Shane McMahon's on Miz TV. They polled the WWE Universe. They got a mixed reaction, but they concluded that this meant the fans wanted them as a team, so now they're a tag team.
Yeah,
that's the payoff.
Yeah, I just loved that. I actually did think that the comedy with Vince and Miz was kind of cute. Where Miz is acting like he's asking for Shane's hand in marriage, and Vince is acting all weird and everything, and will you please give me your blessing and all this? And Vince wouldn't give him his blessing. Vince made him wrestle a tag team match.
We had Jeff Hardy beating Samoa Joe via countout. And then in the main event, Rusev beat Nakamura to win the U.S. title.
So in the Joe match, they're brawling outside, and Jeff gets in first, but after Joe chokes him out. So keep that thing going. And yeah, Nakamura won with a macho kick. He won.
Rusev won.
I mean, yeah. I mean, Rusev won. Yeah, won the title clean. So 6 months too late, maybe 4 months too late.
There you go. It's a new day, though, Dave. These guys are all going to get their opportunities now.
Yeah, well, they're putting lots of baby faces over now, so that's more uplifting, and it's less.
It's definitely better than before.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think that you want to save your heat to where it's going to draw, rather than just beat people down with it to the point where they just get tired of it. And
I didn't get tired of it, but it just means nothing.
But it means exactly. Then the thing you want is you don't want it to mean nothing.
No, you've got to save your beatdowns for when they're needed,
rather than every single angle has to have a beatdown. Yeah. Well, it's not just the beatdowns. It's the screwy stuff and failure.
By the way, I want to mention
is like babyface. Babyfaces. The thing with babyfaces is an effective babyface inherently cannot be a failure. But when you book people to fail all the time, and then expect them to be like top babyfaces, on occasion, because some guys are so talented or likable or just connect in some weird way that they are idiot booking proof. And there's very few people historically like that, but there are those people. And when you have them, you think, aha, I know how to book. When in fact, no, some people are idiot proof booking. But again, the majority of people are not, and most people who are booked most babyfaces who are booked to look like idiots don't get over.
All right. What I was going to say was, a long time ago, they did the deal where Charlotte destroyed Ronda Rousey with a kendo stick. And then
it wasn't that long ago.
Well, the point is, the very next night, they did the exact same thing with Braun Strowman. And we had that debate about why couldn't they wait a week? And then it was sort of like, well, maybe he wanted to get surgery soon. He didn't. He got it a week later after the second Raw. So they could have waited a week. They just had to beat the hell out of him the next night, which basically rendered the Ronda thing completely forgettable.
Well, might as well be. She didn't sell it. She
didn't sell a damn thing.
I mean, she took a real life beating for her art that was a waste. It's in the old days, at least when you took that beating, it was to build an audience for a return because you sold it. It's I have no idea why she did that, although it did kind of get Charlotte over, and It did. I do think that people, when they see Ronda Rousey and Charlotte Flair, are going to think it's a big match. But if Ronda Rousey had actually sold it, I think they think it's a way bigger match. But that's, it's already been said and done.
All right, Will Ospreay is heading to Ring of Honor.
Yeah, I just filled out stuff for him. As a matter of fact, they're getting his visa stuff in order, I guess.
The old deal where you have to alert the government that he is in fact a tremendous, one-of-a-kind wrestler worldwide.
Yeah, I actually wrote that.
Yep.
I mean, I don't lie, and I didn't lie there. Jesus Christ! Do you know that he put something up on Twitter, and I forget the number, but he worked almost as many matches this year as the top guys in WWE.
Oh, I believe that.
And
half of those were over Mania weekend.
And he would have worked more, except he was out because of the injury. I mean, you talk about a guy who was out for a couple of months due to injuries. So it's like the idea that his schedule's his schedule might be, well, it's different kind of tough. I don't know. Believe me, WWE schedule is really tough, but I guess geographically England's not so bad because it's not like this giant geographical country, but there are guys. When Cody was first started on the Indies, his schedule was way worse than WWE because he was going from place to place as opposed to you fly in and you work 4 cities in close proximity with each other, as opposed to every morning getting on the flight and flying cross country or into Canada or whatever. I don't know how Will's thing really worked as far as, and again, a lot of the dates are probably England. Some of the dates were Australia and all that. But the thing with him, I guess, bringing up those dates is that, I mean, I always consider it almost impossible to have great matches every single night on a WWE schedule. Not even necessarily, and again, not even necessarily advisable at times too. You got to know when to do it, and you know when to have a good match and when to have a great match. Because if you're out there trying to have a great match, modern style, every single night, you're probably going to beat your body up too much. And I guess he did. But the point is that he was out there. I mean, I would watch stuff of Will Ospreay in front of 500 people in Australia, and he's doing 4.5-star matches. I mean, he just, the level that he pushed himself at this year was unbelievable. I mean, again, it's one thing when you're, in a circuit and you're working with guys that and all this. I mean, he was going all over the world, working with local guys, working with guys who were great, working with guys who weren't so great. But he's out there just, like every night in that junior tournament and all this, doing that thing. I mean, because Okada's I think the for modern wrestling, I think Okada's kind of got it down. He probably works too hard too, because he's got that drive to be the best. But with Okada, it's when you watch Okada, when it's not a big match, he'll go out there, he'll do stuff. He doesn't do nothing. He'll give you the drop kick most nights, and that's the big spot you pop for. You'll get the Rainmaker when he's going to win, and you'll get your signature stuff. You see real Okada, but he ain't out there. He's not out there trying to have his big singles match style in every single tag match. He knows when to do it. Now, when that big show comes, I mean, when was the last time that guy didn't have a great match on a big show? I mean, I have no idea. I have no idea when. So I think that's for modern, because who else is like that never on the big show fails, or fails seems too wrong. Because there's a big difference between always being great and failure. How many guys are always great every single time on the big event? Maybe Kota Ibushi. I don't know.
ESPN named Daniel Cormier the Fighter of the Year.
Cool. He had a great year. Did you see the stuff with him and Jon Jones?
No, I didn't.
Jon Jones is saying that he'll give $100,000 to charity if Daniel Cormier will fight him. And he's acting like Daniel Cormier. Conor McGregor really won 2 world titles, but you didn't. It's like, fuck off, dude. You know what I mean?
Jon Jones.
Jon Jones didn't enroll in VADA. I mean, I didn't expect that he would. You know, it's weird because I don't know. Like, if it's me and I don't know. I was just thinking, like, when they brought that thing up to him, you know, it's just kind of weird anyway. But when they brought that up to him at the hearing, you know, wouldn't it be cool if we'll pay for it. We'll enroll you in VADA for a couple of months, and that way you can clear your name. And it's like, I knew he wasn't going to do it, okay? But I thought, like, you know what? If he really got, you know, framed, and he really wanted to clear his name, you know, and again, there's no obligation. I'm not holding it against him. I was only thinking, like, what would I do if somehow or other, with no knowledge whatsoever, like I tested positive for something, what would I do? That I knowingly didn't take anything. And I mean, what I would do is I would never touch a frickin' supplement because I wouldn't, you know what I mean? I just wouldn't. I wouldn't touch a frickin' supplement. And I would say, fucking test me every single day because I'm honest, you know? And I knew he wouldn't do it. So I guess maybe I am judging him. I don't know. But you know, it's just an interesting thing, you know, because again, the idea of him volunteering to take more tests that the commission would pay for, so he could clear his own name. It's like if he did like go through like 4 months of more stringent testing, that doesn't. It's like, are we really going to believe that proves that he was clean all these years? No. So he does have nothing to gain. But still, I don't know. I just thought, like, you know, God, if I was like framed, you know, if somebody, like, I went to some restaurant and somebody spiked my salad with steroids, with Turinabol, you know, which I suppose could happen, right? Really? Do you think it could?
No.
Like if I go to Olive Garden, they're going to put Turinabol in my dish. So.
I think that'd be unlikely, but I guess anything's possible.
But but if you're Jon Jones,
well, sure.
Jon Jones, you think it's possible?
Well, I mean, yeah, you'd be the only one.
So yeah, I don't know. I would think that I would quit eating at Olive Garden. Didn't he say that? Didn't he say that he's not
eating there anymore?
No more Olive Garden.
Yeah.
All
right, everybody, we're going to wrap it up on that note today. We'll have more on the Hall of Fame on Observer Live tomorrow. Dave's going to be on, and the issue's up on the front page right now, so check it out. And we'll be back later on. So that's it. We'll talk to you again after a while.